It's July, which means it's pretty much too late to plant anything in the garden, right? Hold it right there, because that is not the case. In fact, it could not be further from the truth. In fact, I'm planting in my own kitchen garden every single day. So in this video, I'm going to show you what you can plant in July, right in the middle of summer. All right, friends, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to the Gardenary channel. That way you'll know every time we drop a new great video, just like this one today. And we have a special gift to give you when you subscribe. So take a screenshot as soon as you do, send it to hello@gardenary.com with the subject line subscribe to YouTube, and we will sign you up for our free gardening resource. Now let's talk about what to plant in July. So this is gonna vary for everyone depending on where you're gardening. For me, right now, I'm gardening here in the Chicago area, where it's warm, like 75, 80-ish, not too hot. We're in the middle of what I like to call the warm season. But I've also got clients way down south in Texas, in Houston, and they're planting too, and they're in what we like to call the middle of the hot season. So there's two things you got to figure out before you know what to plant for yourself in July. And I'm going to show you, for an example, what I've just planted in this bed I cleaned out this past week in July in Chicago. So first thing you got to know about where you live is how soon the season is going to shift. And how many days will the season move from what it is right now to either, probably since we're in July, unless you're in the southern hemisphere, we're going to be moving cooler. Cooler, not warmer. If you're in the southern hemisphere, you're moving warmer. So you want to look at your climate, look at your forecasted temperatures, and see how many days you are away from when the temperatures are going to take a dramatic shift. So for me here in the Chicago area, our highs right now go between 75 to 85. They were in the 90s for a while. That was hot. And then they're down in, say, the 50s, 60s for the lows. This is not really going to shift until late September. Every now and then we'll have a little cool dip in the middle of September, but generally we're not going to see a big shift to cooler weather until late September. So that means I've got all of July, that's 31 days, all of August, also 31 days, that's 62 days, plus at least half of September. So I've got like 80, 85 days, right, before the season shifts. So notice I didn't say before my first frost date, because that's actually in October. It's just when the season shifts. Now the same is kind of true in Houston, but even a little bit later. So right now they're in pretty hot weather, very hot weather. It's in the high 90s. The lows are really even in the 80s some nights, very humid. And the temperatures are going to stay that way all the way through July, August, and really September, probably to the end of September. So they've got 90 days at least where the temperatures are going to stay hot before it shifts down a little bit lower to the warm season. So first, do that math. I just did my math. You got to do your math. Find out when the season is going to start to drop in your area. That's the first one, step one. Step two is figure out which plants only need that amount of time to grow and be harvested in this current season. So for me, I'm in the warm season. So plants that love warm weather, those are the ones I'm going to be digging into and planting more of this month. And then I'm just going to make sure I'm planting varieties and types of plants in the warm season that only need about 75 days to finish up. So if it was, say, a squash, like a really big squash, I don't actually have one of the squashes here because I'm not planting any, but if it was a big, say, butternut squash or a loofah gourd or something like that, that needed 90 to 120 days of warm weather, I'm not going to plant that right now because I'm not going to have enough time to see that plant to its full harvest. But if I find a plant like this one, these are purple dove beans. These are going to sprout in less than 1 week, maybe a little bit more, 7 to 14 days. And these will be ready to harvest in 55 to 65 days. So I know, because I checked out my weather, I know how long I need to let this plant be ready to harvest. And I've got plenty of time for this to be planted, for it to grow to its full maturity and be harvested before the weather shifts. Another great example is the zinnia flower. So zinnias want to be planted in the warm season. They love it when the weather is in the 70s and high 80s, even sometimes in the 90s. and they will bloom and be ready to enjoy in 50 to 65 days. Again, within my planting range. So let me show you the things I planted in this bed just the last few days here. And some of them are even starting to sprout, which is pretty great. So I covered them up with my mesh. This is my garden mesh. We have a whole tutorial about this mesh if you want to check it out on our channel. And I cover them up so that the birds and the rabbits and things don't get in here. So if you saw my video all about brassicas bolting, this bed last week was packed full of all kinds of brassicas that were bolting because the season wasn't optimal for them anymore, way too warm. So I pulled them out and then I came back in and planted. Now some of these things you can see are starting to grow up already and some are not, but I can kind of tell you what I added. So right here you can see these beans. They're just starting to break the surface of the ground, which is pretty exciting. There's another bean there. So these have been in the ground for probably 4 days. Yeah, 4 days or less. And you can see they're already starting to unfold, which is pretty exciting. So I did beans, rows of beans on both sides, bush beans on both sides. So those are gonna fill in all along here and all along the other side of the garden. So I did a lot of bush beans. I know those will finish in 55, 65, 70 days max. The other thing that I planted are some short season cucumbers. So these are called Poinsett 76. And check that out right there. It says 65 days. Nice, right? And can you see, I need a manicure. Don't notice that, okay? 65 days, so these are perfect for right now, right? I can put them in. They're gonna have all of July, all of August, and I'm gonna have cucumbers at the end of August, beginning of September. So I planted these cucumbers all along the trellis here, and I don't see any that have come up yet. Oh, maybe there's the start of one. I may have just messed it up, but there's a cucumber seed right there that's just started to break the surface of the soil. I probably should not have touched it. Shh, don't tell. So these should be starting, I can see another one right here starting to kind of unfurl. It's so little. But these should start to break the surface of the soil, and these are gonna climb the trellis and take the place of these peas, because these peas need to come out too. So I've got cucumbers on the trellis, I've got bush beans on both sides of the garden, and then I also threw in a couple of little flower seeds. So I did put a couple of zinnias, kind of scattered them around on the corners of the beds, and those have not broken out yet, but I'm sure they will. And then I'm sure you've noticed all these tiny little seeds, right? These little seedlings. Well, I planted arugula and mizuna and just kind of scattered these throughout the beds after I'd planted my bigger seeds. So you can see the arugula here starting to come up. It's always one of the first things that pop. And then I also, if you notice here, I added 1 or 2 big squash seeds. So you can see that one's just starting to germinate. So that one's coming there, and then I should have 1 or 2. Doesn't look, oh yeah, one's starting to come right here too. So it's just starting to break the surface of the soil, which is pretty awesome. So I added some squash back here. These squash as well are supposed to be 65, 70-day squash. So you can see, even in just a few days, you're gonna get lots of growth in July. You should have a lot of sunshine, longer days, and you may not have a lot of rain. We've had a ton of rain over the last few days, so that's really helped with the germination of these seeds. Now, even if you're not having a lot of rain, I would recommend getting your seeds really well watered in, especially in the first 7 to 10 days, especially because you're planting in July. So these seeds can definitely dry out and die very quickly if you don't keep them well watered. But those are all the things I planted in my Chicago garden. Now for my clients in Houston, we're doing very similar things, but we're doing plants that are more tolerant for the hotter weather. So instead of doing like a cucumber for here, I would do, say, an Armenian cucumber or Suyulong cucumber that doesn't mind the degrees being more like in the 90s. I could do lots of jalapeno peppers. So those I would put in by plant. But I would adjust, just as I've done it here, I would adjust based on how many days I've got left in the season and how many days it's going to take for the plant to be ready to harvest. So there you have it. July is not the time to stop planting. In fact, it is the perfect time to keep planting. In fact, I made it my goal, I actually wrote it in my journal today, that I would plant something every single day in the month of July. Do you think I can keep that promise? I hope so. All right, thank you guys so much for watching and for following along with what we're doing in July. We've started a brand new exciting thing in Gardenary called Gardenary 365. It's a membership platform that gives you access to all things Gardenary and helps you build habits into your everyday life that are garden centered. So you can find out more about that on the Gardenary blog and by Googling Gardenary 365. Thanks so much for watching and planting with me in July. I'll see you next time. Bye.